I'm going to be making a part 2 to the Vance family case, but I have to wait a few days to do that because there's information that I want to provide in that video, and I need that information to provide. But for now, I want to talk about this new case with this kid, and his name is Giovanni Pelletier. I believe that's how you pronounce it. This kid was from North Carolina, and he was on vacation down in Florida. And he was staying on the west side of Florida, just north of Fort Myers. He had cousins that lived further north and on the East Coast, and they came to pick him up. So they traveled from Mims, Florida, all the way to this Inglewood area of Florida, which is just north of Fort Myers. And apparently, this kid wanted to absorb the black culture from his dad's side. That's the most blunt way I can put it. The dad's in prison, so it's kind of a lost cause if you aren't going to meet your dad, you know. But these cousins drove to pick him up, and they picked him up around 1:30 in the morning, and then started driving back for Mims, Florida. Let me show you a map here. So they traveled from up here on the east coast of Florida down to the North Fort Myers area to Inglewood, right? Picked him up at 1:30 in the morning, and then started heading back towards Tampa to cut across the state on Highway 4. Something started to go wrong around here. Let me show you a map of that. They were about an hour into their trip back. So that would be about 2:30 in the morning. And they were at I-75 and Highway 70 when something really strange started to happen. So this kid, Giovanni, allegedly becomes really, really paranoid and acting crazy in the car. So he allegedly began threatening them with a knife. So they pulled over because he was so paranoid and got him out of the car, threw his bag and his phone out, and then took off. So what happens here is after that, an alleged text comes into his mom and to other family members that just says, "Help." And to be totally honest here, most blacks don't understand this kind of thing, and they haven't researched it, so it seems completely shady that these cousins claim that Giovanni became extremely paranoid and then got so scared that he allegedly pulled out a knife. This caused the cousins to pull over and order him out of the car an hour into the trip, right? And what we see here is a story that has happened over and over in the past. And then Giovanni's body was found like a week later in a shallow pond right where he was dropped off at, in a pond that you really couldn't just drown in. It's very hard to drown in, let's put it that way. So there's something weird here, right? Now, what is also strange here is something that I was literally talking about 2 videos ago. The mother gets these text messages from her kid that just say help with no other information. Now, you've got to put yourself in this situation and really think about it. What if your phone dies? What if your phone is running low on battery? If I was that kid's age and had to text a family member, I'd say something like, you know, I need help. My cousins kicked me out of the car and I'm stranded on I-75. At least a little bit of detail, not just help. It just doesn't make sense. And it lines up with all these other calls from people that have happened where it's, you know, the person says, I'm in a field, and then they vanish or whatever. I mean, I was just talking about this. It's always the least amount of information possible. Always. And it's very weird. That's why all these phone calls come through, like the Todd Geib case, where there's always a phone call, you know, with these people, and they say, I'm in a forest somewhere, and then the phone cuts dead. Just like the case of Philip Taylor Kramer from Iron Butterfly. He ended up getting into technology, which is the same technology that we're talking about in this video. He went missing, but while he was going missing, all these short calls to his family went out. Then he dials 911 allegedly and says, they say, can we help you? And he says, yes. My name is Philip Taylor Kramer, and I'm going to kill myself, right? And then they say, wait a minute, what? And then he hangs up. Because these are all meant to throw people off the path. And this seems to happen after traveling some distance a lot. And as I say a lot, you're basically hearing the same story over and over with small details changed. Mainly the person's name, the location, etc. The rest of the details are identical. You know, I could go on for 12, 15 hours about different cases, but I want to show you a few cases that are really the same thing and go into that. This is the case of the 28-year-old German Lars Matank. He traveled with his friends to go see a football game or whatever, right? Well, during that trip, he coincidentally gets a blown eardrum. He goes to the doctor, they check it out, they tell him not to travel for a couple days. And his friends go home, and he has to go home later because he has to wait for his ear to heal. Strangely and oddly and coincidentally, he begins to hear people following him. He never sees anybody. He hears people following him. He calls his mom and says there's 4 guys that are after him that are following him. And it's just voices. He eventually goes to the airport with his bags, and when he's walking through, there's a doctor at the airport. They go to check him out. Well, a construction worker walks in, and he screams out, "I don't want to die," and goes running off. It's the same kind of thing. He travels somewhere. He begins acting paranoid, believing that people are following him because he's hearing something. All right? And coincidentally has a damaged eardrum. He hears them following him around. It totally messes with him because that is the sane reaction to an insane thing, right? He runs out here and they never find him again. So there's one. I'm just going to show you a few of these. There's the case of Terrence Woods Jr., who became very paranoid working on a film, right, out in the woods. We were just talking about him. Out of nowhere, he takes off on a dead run into the woods because he's scared of the people around him, and they never see him again. It's the same story over and over and over. This is the case of Magdalena Zook. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. She was a Polish chick that traveled to a hotel in Egypt, I believe, and she began hearing voices talking to her in the hotel. They immediately thought she was crazy. They lock her up, and she ended up like jumping out a window and dying. So she was picked up because she was acting paranoid and crazy at this hotel, brought somewhere, and she jumps out a window and dies. So it's the same thing over and over. We don't know the details with this new case. When they say he was acting paranoid, what does that mean exactly? I need to know the details. What were they saying, right? But we have one case where the girl lived. And this was the case of Eloise Lindsay. She was 22 years old, and she was walking along the Appalachian Trail in South Carolina. They say here she became frightened or paranoid that somebody was trying to run her down, said the director of emergency preparedness, right? But he's framing it in a very strange way. She was hearing people following her. It says here that the 22-year-old Eloise Lindsay insisted Tuesday that men chased her along the trail. So she could hear it, but she never really saw it. And that is the case with every one of these. What if this kid, this new case, what if this kid was hearing voices or hearing them say things that they weren't saying, right? And he gets out of the car, and then these alleged voices convince him to hide in the water. And how could you do that? The voices could say something like, well, I hope he doesn't hide in the water because that's the only place we can't track him. You get what I'm saying? That's how they manipulate these people to do really strange appearing things. So, you know, they'll say, hey, we can't track him in the water if he goes in the water. So he goes in the water, and then something bad happens to him. So, you know, this Eloise Lindsay chick, she was chased for like a week. It was crazy. She says here, I could tell there was no good intent involved. And when she was found, she was scared of the actual searchers that were searching for her because she thought that she was finally seeing the men who were chasing her. This happens over and over, and these people are not mentally ill. What do you think the odds are that Lars Matank, 28 years old, this happens to people a lot older, but these are just younger cases that I wanted to show. What do you think the odds are that this kid travels gets a blown eardrum, and then all of a sudden he starts hearing voices in those ears, like a blown speaker is vibrating, right? Starts hearing voices that are following him and vanishes, and he's never seen again. Do you really believe that he just went psychotic? That idea is just insane. So everything that we are hearing, this Giovanni Pelletier case seems identical to the rest of these cases. He starts freaking out. He gets out of the car. He goes missing. And either people are gone forever. In his case, he's found in water a week later, dead. How does that part happen? I don't know. I don't know if the body suddenly cramps up and you can't move. You know, a lot of these people are found and they have GHB in their system, which the body naturally makes. And we've talked about this. And radio waves are the drugs of the future. They've talked about that. So you could cause the body to make a lot of GHB while somebody is in the water, and then suddenly they become paralyzed while they're hiding in the water, and they drown. You could drown in a foot of water like that. In a foot. So you really have to consider that these kids that picked him up, the people that picked him up, the cousins, are telling the truth, and this just happened to happen to this guy like it happens to a lot of people out there. Could totally be the case, but we'll wait for more details to come out. Before I get out of here, one important thing that I would like to bring up is that flying has an effect on the sinuses and on the ears, big time, pressure. And there's sort of a half-life or an after effect to flying. It affects you. It's like going down into a submarine. There is pressure that changes. I had a friend who traveled to Japan to do some shows, right? And halfway there, his wisdom tooth blew out because of the flight. And he spent the entire time he was in Japan in the hospital and then flew back because it had gone so bad for him. You have to think about this. It's kind of important because Lars Matank was on a plane. Magdalena Zook was on a plane. Terrence Woods Jr. had been flying. The only person that we don't know about out of the other 4 cases is Eloise Lindsay. We don't know if she flew to her destination or not. And we don't know if Giovanni Pelletier had been flying from the Carolinas down to Florida in the first place. If he did fly, it's kind of a weird coincidence that all these people go on a flight, has an effect on your ear and your inner ear, and then suddenly you're hearing voices and you become paranoid. Very strange, right? That's something that we need to get into in the future. Because a lot of these cases, the people fly, and then within a couple days to a week after that flight, something really strange happens. Again, I'll be releasing a part 2 to the Vance family, and that is it for now. Look out for Charlie.